what I really enjoy of my work is that I put shipping and transport and transportation in a broader context. So I have colleagues who work on investment. I have colleagues who work on macroeconomic trends or on trade agreements. And it's amazing. It's really very enjoyable. I think they also realize, and that's what we then try, don't forget shipping.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to episode 151 of the Shipping Podcast. It's that time of the year when we all look back and think about what happened the last year. I think maybe most of us want to forget about the pandemic year 2020 and look forward instead. But I think it's important to stop and think about that now is the time to decide where we want to go from here. What is that new normal that everybody is talking about? What does it look like? It's a momentum now, and we need to take a holistic view over current developments and where they are taking us into the future. So I decided to invite someone equally interested in that, if not more, and ask him about what he thinks is going on right now and which course we are taking. His name is Jan Hoffmann, and he works for UNCTAD. That is the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. UNCTAD is a permanent intergovernmental body established by the United Nations General Assembly in 1964. The headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. And that is where Jan is in charge of the Trade Logistics Branch, Division on Technology and Logistics. I hope you will enjoy our conversation. I did very much.
Well, it has changed. The working days have changed. Typical working day used to imply much more preparing for travel and reporting from travel and working during traveling. I traveled on average 3 to 4 months per year over the last almost 25 years. The very first year in my career at the IMO, there I had 1 or 2 missions per year. But then when I started in ECLAC in Latin America, it went up and up and up. And now with UNCTAD also covering the world, a lot of travel. But the funny thing is I don't miss it. I thought I would miss it much more, that we are working from, you see, my home office. Well, our listeners cannot see it, but I feel very comfortable here in my home office. And you can do a lot over the distance. A lot of the work we do, be it research, be it advisory, be it meetings with the diplomats, it works well because everybody was now forced to get ready. It would not have worked that well 1 year ago because most people said, no, I don't have the equipment, I don't know how to use it, I don't have the critical mass. You need everybody to be prepared. And now everybody was forced to prepare him and herself, and it works. No?
And what does your wife think about it?
Oh, she claims that she is happy that I am more often at home. She is also working from home. She's teaching. She's a teacher of Spanish. She's from Spain and a trained teacher. So that is good. And since our 3 sons left home, they are now working and living outside and abroad. So we have spare office space. We can use previous children's rooms as our offices, and it works well. We are lucky. No, there are many who have little children at home or don't have a good setup or for health reasons. In that sense, we are lucky that we can continue. And also, I'm lucky that I have done those 25 years and even before with a little family shipping business. So I have traveled, I have seen, I have crossed borders on foot between Burundi and Congo, or I have climbed up a gantry crane in Nicaragua, and I've met people personally and have had a beer with our consultants in Thailand. So now I can draw on this and do it with Zoom and emails, a lot of emails.
How many countries have you visited?
I have stepped into 130. I've slept in 102 or something, and I've had my hair cut in 71.
I know. I've read your blog. The blog is wonderful.
Thanks. Yeah, it is fun. I mean, when you travel and you do not only want to see the hotel or the ministry or the port authority, so trying to engage a little bit with locals and then practice your English or French or Spanish or sign language. It doesn't always work. Like, how do you explain this? When you show like a small distance between two fingers and say, please only cut very little, because I have another haircut in 2 weeks in another country, and the gentleman misunderstands and he only leaves that little on my hair. So I had 2 occasions where it was really, really bad. It was too short. So I had to then stop having haircuts for 2 or 3 months because it was too short, but never mind.
Where can people read about this? What's the name of your blog?
It's janhoffmann.life. Jan Hoffmann, F-N, that's the German version of Hoffmann, and then life. And there I've my photo blog. I have some blogs about trade logistics and shipping, some thinking aloud, and then this one research project of trade in goods and trade in services. Because if you want to export services, you export a haircut service. Before you need to import goods, you need to import scissors, shampoos, and machines. And in the smaller and poorer countries, it's effectively that all these inputs are imports. They are not made in Bhutan or Rwanda or made in Paraguay. No, they are made abroad. And then the hairdresser is normally local. In the rich countries, it's the opposite. It's the shampoo or the machine and the chair and whatever is national or European. But the service provider comes very often from abroad. My hairdresser in the UK was from Barbados. My hairdresser in Austria was from Laos and so on. Or the one in Canada was from China. And then there are some really funny places where everything is from abroad. Like my hairdresser on the Marshall Islands was from the Philippines. And of course, the scissors, shampoo were also imports.
So, Mr. Hoffmann, could you please introduce yourself? Who are you?
Yeah, I'm from a little village in northern Germany, Horneburg, near Buxtehude. Yes, that exists. And I'm now working here in UNCTAD, in the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva. That's already since 2003. Before that, I spent 7 years in Latin America. I worked in Chile for the UN Regional Commissions. And before ECLAC, I worked 2 years for the IMO, International Maritime Organization. Before that, I was young and grew up in Germany. My parents had a little shipping company. So I learned a little bit of everything with a small tween decker. Started with the German flag, then moved to the flag of Antigua and Barbuda, started with German seafarers, then employed Polish seafarers through a crewing agent, Navigo Management in Cyprus. So it was a small company, but for 8 years, while studying economics, while doing a PhD in economics, this actually helped me. It still helps me today a lot that I've also worked on the ship. I've done my certificate, 2-week certificate, Seefahrtsbuchen. So it's a small company, but you have seen a little bit of everything. And when we now produce our UNCTAD Review of Maritime Transport and the statistics, and you see numbers, that I have an image in my head of, that's 1,000 deadweight. This is an oil tanker on our radar when we sit on our ship in front of in Rotterdam. So that's a story.
It's a long life in that short story, I would say.
Yeah.
What is UNCTAD? Could you please tell our listeners, what does UNCTAD do?
Yeah, UNCTAD was created largely to support developing countries to benefit from international trade and to participate in international trade. And the area I'm responsible for, the trade logistics branch, we are 20 people altogether with more than 20 nationalities, and among those 20 colleagues, because some have dual nationality. It's really a very great international team. And what we do, we like to describe in 3 pillars, 3 building blocks. The first one is research. So a typical working day for me could be like I open an Excel sheet with the latest fleet deployment statistics and I try to measure how the small island developing states, are they picking up, are they better or not so well connected? Over the years, we have worked on transport cost databases. If we want to reduce transport costs, we have to measure transport costs. If we want to see where can developing countries participate in business, we have to develop country profiles. So that's the number one, that's research.
May I ask, where does the figures come from? Who puts in the data at the other end?
Good question. We have access to all UN official statistics, of course, especially in trade and GDP and employment. That is important context. For certain shipping data, we really have to struggle and find it ourselves. There's no really centralized source. We have become a little bit the source for seaborne trade statistics or port traffic, where we really go from website to a national contact to industry source. But then we also have partners, and I appreciate that we have access to like top-down data from Clarksons, from marine traffic, from MBS Transmodal, Marine Benchmark. So these are companies that give data to us. Sometimes they ask me, how much can you pay? I tell them how much I can pay. And then they say, forget it. So it's true. I mean, it's your taxes who pay our salary. Thank you very much. We have not much budget, but we have a very good convening power. We have the United Nations publication on maritime transport. So in a way, we have been lucky to really have a lot of data on port calls, on performance, on fleet deployment, on CO2 emissions, on the whole fleet ownership. It's more that our time is the limit to do more with this amazing data sets we have.
So you are waiting for the AI to make a revolution, yeah?
Exactly. And all our colleagues, they are learning continuously how to make more use of this data. But I have to finish to respond to your question of what does UNCTAD do, because this research is only one of our pillars. The second one is technical assistance. So we are really like a consultancy, like an advisory body, like a training institute, helping developing countries with capacity building. And for this, our work also is project development, putting together terms of reference for consultants, do a log frame, do a budget, do a Gantt chart, and really with funding, additional funding we may receive from the European Union, from GIZ, from USAID, from the World Bank, then we do projects, like more on the ground. And the third one, being here in Geneva, is the intergovernmental work. And I really feel privileged here. The diplomats, the ambassadors, or not just ambassadors, of especially the smaller countries here in Geneva, they are doing an impressive work. They have to cover health, labor, standards, trade, everything, migration, human rights. And if we can help them understand and negotiate better WTO trade facilitation agreement, or standards at the UNCTAD, or all types of decisions on, sometimes it is just words, but sometimes it is agreements on fisheries, on those issues. So that's a third pillar where we work with our clients here in Geneva, providing them with a forum and also giving them presentations, material, and helping them. So these are the 3 UNCTAD pillars. In all this, of course, my work also includes management. So we have to recruit people. We have to prepare and plan the production. Already now we have a meeting next week to plan next year's review of maritime transport. Like, it's a production process. You have to procure the data until the press and the printing and the formatting, the authors, the peer review. And all this is, I'm nobody's boss. I just have to coordinate. And then we have to report to our member states. So it's a lot of admin work as well to organize these 3 pillars.
So you're still waiting for the AI also on that one?
Yes, I'm fascinated by this topic of AI, more as a personal hobby. I think in the one of my tasks is also to try to identify what are the key issues of the future for trade logistics, shipping, ports. And I think 2 issues that we have to proactively work more on One is digitalisation, including from blockchain to AI to tracking. I mean, there's so many things, and it's really fast how this is moving. I sometimes say technological progress will never be as slow as today. It's not slow, it's fast, but it's getting faster and faster. It's amazing. And the second one is decarbonisation in maritime transport, which has really come to the forefront over the last few years. And there I'm very proud that I found not so long ago a very old document, 25 years ago, the very first document that I wrote for the United Nations system was when I was a junior professional officer at the IMO in London. And I produced a document that introduced the internalization of externalities. And to my knowledge, that was the first document in 1995 at the IMO that uses this concept. I can't prove it. Maybe there are other documents, but there is an official document presented to the Technical Cooperation Committee that promotes the idea of internalizing externalities. And I think we are slowly moving that direction with market-based measures, with making whoever emits or causes emissions ensure that those who are affected by those emissions somehow, you reduce the emissions, or you clean up, or you to help others to mitigate the effects, to adapt to.
So now I'm impressed by you, of course, as I usually am. But on the other hand, I'm a little bit sad that it takes 25 years to reach the same conclusion. Why does it take so long? Why are the processes so long?
It's a classical problem of public goods. I mean, everybody wants to benefit from a public good, but who wants to voluntarily share? And a lot can be said and criticized about the United Nations. But we are only as good as our member states allow us to advance. And individual member states have to report to their voters, to their taxpayers. And it's very difficult, a very slow process to make everybody doing together the next step, because it's so easy to be a free rider. It's so easy. So in that sense, even the last week at the MEPC and the IMO, there was a lot of criticism that it was not ambitious enough and so on. But I'm impressed. I congratulated my IMO colleagues. Said, look, there is a very first step is being done. And yes, there are proposals for a $2 contribution. And many people say that's nothing, that's not big enough. Well, I hope for a slippery slope in a positive sense. I hope at least we start putting together a mechanism. So yes, it's easy to criticize these slow processes, but on the other hand, never ever in human history have we United Nations like we have now, where you have colleagues in the secretariats of the specialized agency of the UN, getting the member states together, doing this work I tried to explain, like the research, the technical assistance, and the intergovernmental, and make them do these steps slowly, but working together. It's a classical problem of public goods, problem of the commons.
So you mentioned now decarbonisation and digitalisation. Have you seen any good examples of where we can see something happening?
You see a lot in the ports, of course, because they can directly see the benefit there. You don't have the problem of the public goods. You have the port community systems. You have single windows being set up. At UNCTAD, the biggest technical assistance program actually is on digitalization, if you want. It's called ASICUDA. It's Automated System for Customs Data. Almost 100 countries in the world use this software to automate customs. And this then can be linked and built upon to create single windows, cargo tracking systems, benchmarking, pre-arrival processing, payments. I mean, there are a lot of things that can be built on this system. And you can actually show with some econometric regressions that those countries who invest in the latest version of ASICUDA, they also report better indicators like the World Bank Doing Business or the Logistics Perception Index, which is now called Performance Index, but it's a perception index. But it's a good index. So yes, I think there's things are moving. I think we can learn a lot from the container, actually. If we look at digitalization today, think of the other big technology that has revolutionized shipping. It's the container. It was invented by the private sector, Mr. McLean, a trucker, but it only really changed shipping and world trade. And you may have seen the Economist had an article calling it the humble hero. There's a lot of research that shows that the container has been more important for global trade than trade agreements or trade liberalization or than the WTO, or even more important than UNCTAD.
Yeah. Wow. Is that possible?
So the digitalization, also we see private sector initiatives, the Digital Container Shipping Alliance Association, or the IBM Maersk initiative and so on. It is important that in the end, there will be a global standard where smaller countries, smaller players can rely on transparent, open access to those standards. So here in Geneva, you have UNCTAD, you have the ISO, you have the WTO, you also need the World Customs Organization. So I think digitalization probably, I hope, will also move in this direction once you have blockchain, languages, exchange of data. There are so many things that I very much believe in the role of international organizations to also help shipping benefit from these processes.
But I think maybe the private sector also needs to realize that it's standardization. I mean, we have a tradition in the maritime industry to keep everything very close to our chest because we are afraid that our competitors would grab it and run with it. But I mean, I live in Gothenburg and here is the automotive industry. And I mean, they have collaborated so much. So there is a platform and then everyone builds on that one afterwards. And at the same time, they have a lab for all startups where they can come and meet all the big players and present to them at the same time, which is because, you can't really go and knock on the door of Volvo or Geely or someone and say, hello, I have a good idea for a small thing in the rear end of this car thing that maybe you should, And I can't really see that in the maritime industry. Neither the place for the startups to actually present, and I can't really see the collaboration on the private side yet. Can you see that?
There are attempts, there are initiatives. I was lucky I could participate in some workshops of the Global Maritime Forum, which was specifically also digitalization, where specifically they looked at different stages, if you want. And first you optimize, but then also you really have new business opportunities. So they did provide a forum where some startups could meet, could exchange. I think overall the shipping industry is realizing that they have to be more open, more transparent. See now the crewing crisis, the seafarers issue. People tend to think I just get my stuff through the supermarket or even e-commerce things. No, they do not come by air with the FedEx small parcel directly from China. They come largely by ship. And now all of a sudden we have a problem that seafarers cannot go to the ship and from the ship home. And you have to make sure that both happen at the same time. That's a little problem. So there is now more of an outreach to be more visible. Then also thanks to technologies with the whole AIS, there are many ways where it's no longer possible to hide. Every ship, you can see at any moment where it is right now, at what speed it is going, where it is going. You will also be able to see how much CO2 it is emitting. So I think, as generations change and people realize, I see a lot of positive open-mindedness these days in the shipping industry.
So 25 years from now, something will happen.
Yes. I have 10 more years until my retirement, so I am optimistic.
Well, I've been nagging about this for 5 years. As you know, I've been doing this shipping podcast for more than 5 years. And I really think that we need to work on our profile as an industry for many reasons. And now it becomes so apparent when we have the crisis of the crew change, because no one really knew about the maritime industry when everything came around. We know all about it. We know everything there is to know about it, but no one else. So how can we change that?
Well, with more shipping podcasts.
Yeah, I can do a network of those.
Yeah, I don't know. We try our best. I mean, even at UNCTAD with we have this annual report, but we also try our own newsletter, our Twitter, our blog, and try to reach. In fact, what I really enjoy of my work is that I put shipping and transport and transportation in a broader context. So I have colleagues who work on investment. I have colleagues who work on macroeconomic trends or on trade agreements. And it's amazing. It's really very enjoyable. I think they also realize, and that's what we then try, don't forget shipping. Yeah? Don't forget the trade facilitation. Don't forget the procedures. All these are important. And okay, now I think I'm preaching to the converted, but there in many areas, the efficiency of the system, the trade logistics, are more important than the duties, the tariffs. But the reducing tariffs or trade wars or whatever are much more the press than the slowly but continuous improvements in trade efficiency, which we try to monitor, which we try to promote. And also within UNCTAD, try to highlight how important our topic is. And I think we are successful. Our Secretary General, UNCTAD's Dr. Gituyi, he was among the first who had really a call for action in the context of COVID to ensure that ports remain open, ships keep transporting goods, borders remain open quite early, and also already quite early highlighting the challenge of the crew change, the seafarers.
But that is our problem, I think. We are just moving on. We are just moving the goods. We are just making our job without telling anyone. And everything works. I mean, all that toilet paper that people were so afraid of missing out on, it was just there in the shops.
Yeah. No, and this is interesting. In fact, we have just, you may have seen in our review of maritime transport, there is even sort of a forecast projection. And it was in the news, seaborne trade in 2020 is going down by 4.1%. That's our projection. But actually, the real news is that it did not go down more because shipping and ports still worked. And also, not only this, also on the demand side, while the downturn, the economic downturn is more in services. It's the restaurants, the movies, the tourism that is going down. And what do we do, you and I, when we sit at home and can travel less and go less to the restaurant? We buy more stuff. We buy ourselves a new microphone. We buy ourselves a new, better laptop or furniture or stuff. And all this comes by ship. So in the end, both on the supply side, shipping has been successful. There has not been another Hanjin. There have not really been closed ports. Luckily, shipping is, in that sense, on the open ocean. The trucking industry had far more problems because truck drivers could not cross borders. In Africa, many landlocked countries were really, really worried. They really had problems. They were cut off from supply chains because the trucks couldn't cross the border. For air transport, the same thing, because there were no more passenger planes. There was no belly cargo space. And all of a sudden, things had to go on a train. And then the train was stuck at the border between Belarus and Poland or other borders.
But who knows this more than we?
Yeah, have to promote more shipping podcasts.
No, Jan, but I don't have any patience at all. I want everyone to know about what work we're doing in the maritime industry, how much things we're moving and so on. And I'm not sure about, forgive me, but I'm not sure about the spread of the UNCTAD reports. I'm not sure how many people read them and who is reading them and how can we affect that? How can we change people's perception of us? I'm sorry to be upset, but I know you know me.
Yeah, no, it's objectively a challenge. Things are taken for granted. And if things don't work, then you blame the politicians, but maybe unfortunately, shipping continued to work. It worked really well, one has to acknowledge.
How has the pandemic changed your work? What do you see changing?
On the work side, at this moment, I no longer travel, but that's actually not the main thing. It is also how do we deliver our, especially in the technical assistance, because there usually it would really be going to the country, help with some software, some trade information portal, some coordination meetings, getting countries together on a transit corridor and so on. And all this is now more difficult, and we have to reinvent and do this with e-learning tools, e-meetings. And while you and I are now very well connected, internet connection works well. What if you are in Bujumbura or in Ouagadougou? What do you do if you have to connect through a cell phone modem, and before you are connected, you hear beep, 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 and it is difficult. And same for the negotiations here in Geneva. Although in theory, you can have these online meetings. You may recall last week also at the IMO, same story. MEPC met virtually, and they had to do many extra hours. Really impressive how the chairman and the delegates kept going, kept working to conclude this. Nobody was cut off. But this would have been easier, of course, smoother if you had person meeting, where you can also have a quick bilateral during the coffee break and come to some compromise agreement. It's not possible if everything is public on Zoom or another platform. So that has affected our work in the reaching out and collaborating with the clients. The research work, actually not. If anything, it's easier because I'm spending less time in airports or in a airplane seat. So in the research and data and our country profiles, the connectivity index, transport costs, we are making quite good progress, but still we need to implement, we need to translate this. Our work to some extent is that of a translator. We participate in private sector forums. So I'm a member of the Propeller Club in Geneva, or I am active in the International Association of Maritime Economists, academic work. Then we learn, and we translate and transmit what we learn to the policymakers. And that is being made, it's more difficult now. So we really hope that we will get back to normal, to actually meet and engage directly with our members and authorities, Port Authority, Maritime Authority, the diplomacy in Geneva.
I was listening to a webinar with some Vista women from the Far East. It was, I think, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong, and someone else, I can't remember. But the lady in Bangladesh was so screaming for digitalisation, digital documents, because when the ship came to port, the guy who's usually standing on the port with a big bunch of money, he was at home sick. And he couldn't sign the papers, and he couldn't pay for what was going to be paid. When can she expect to have a solution to her problems?
Yeah. No, in fact, you're highlighting that. I briefly alluded to this earlier, that the demand for our work has actually increased. So one thing is how do we work, how the difficulties of implementing, but in terms of demand, exactly the story you just mentioned from Bangladesh, we have many, many such stories where the same people who in the past might have been happy to have a certain power of putting a stamp on something or holding a paper so the moment you automate and digitalize and have pre-arrival processes, electronic payments, more transparency. A lot of our work is also on transparency issues. So we not only to publish on the internet what are the steps and duties and what needs to be done, but also to monitor them and see where can we improve, where can we reduce the number of steps. We had one concrete case. So how many steps does it take to export coffee from Rwanda? I forgot the exact number now, but it was something in the 30s, 30-something steps of a certificate of origin and some permission and some payment and so. Sounds a lot. How many is it to export coffee from Tanzania? Twice as much. So by monitoring and making those steps transparent, and also by being able to compare those, you can then say, I'm not comparing here Singapore or Rotterdam, I'm comparing neighboring countries, similar technology, region, and so on. If anything, I actually would have expected Rwanda to be more because it is landlocked. So you may need some additional paper to transit, but actually it was half as many steps as neighboring Tanzania. So that's just an example, and there may be others where Tanzania is better than Rwanda, but I didn't want to pinpoint, I shouldn't even have mentioned country names perhaps, but that's a reality and a good example where by documenting and monitoring those steps, we can also prepare countries to respond better to the pandemic. Because the fewer steps you have, the more these are automated and electronic, the less you depend on, or the more resilient you are to the situation we are confronting right now.
Less human touches, I've learned that it's called.
Yes, less human touch. It's unfortunate. You like to have human touches probably, but on the other hand, if you need fewer human touches, that's a classical cliche of the structural change. 150 years ago, 80-90% of the population in Europe might have been working in agriculture. Then you have a structural transformation. The challenge is to find new jobs for those who no longer need to manually manufacture or be in agriculture. And if you need fewer people to process paper, well, they can do many other interesting things. And social services, as populations get older, you need more people to look after the elderly. I mean, there's so many other nice things you could do, which still require a human touch. Why insist on some bureaucracy, on some paper? I even think philosophically to request, I hate filling out forms. If something makes me aggressive, if somebody asks me a second time for the same information, I've already registered somewhere, and then I arrive and I have to fill out again. I've refused it at times. I was in a strong position. I was a speaker, and they wanted me to fill out a form. No, I just said no. So they were nervous, rushing out. Somebody filled it out for me. So why ask a human being to do something that a machine could do? Philosophically, I think it's wrong.
I remember this because we traveled to Cartagena in Colombia.
Yes.
And we lost our suitcases.
Yes. Yes, yeah, your suitcase came the next day, I believe. Yeah, and then you had to fill out many forms. Yes,
we did. But we had a good time. We really had a good time.
Yes, it was a very good conference.
Who do you think I should interview the next? Who would you be interested in listening to?
Oh, I didn't think of that many interesting people. You probably have done this already, but we were actually at UNCTAD looking at some human stories in this crewing crisis. So you need to identify seafarers if you have not done so. I'm not sure if you can find a seafarer who is stuck for the last 9 or 12 or more months and really interview him or her, if we find a her, would also be good, and do 1 or 2 or 3 or more of them. No? Maybe that's something, because we're in the same boat, but we are more likely to deal with managers, with decision makers, with more influential people. But to understand what's happening on the ground, why not interview a dock worker or a seafarer and see how their situation really is? On this dock worker and seafarer, one little last story. When this COVID started and we tried to put out information, guidelines, how industry should respond, we learned from some ports that are members of a port network that colleagues of mine in UNCTAD are running, the port management program. So there's a beautiful set of ports that are responding, and they shared their good practices. So we put these on the internet, good practice, what to do, and very technical things, when to wear a mask, when to wash your hands, many practical things. And one item said, please be careful, don't allow the seafarers to leave the ship. and then, of course, that was just the port's perspective. And then we got a phone call from the International Chamber of Shipping and said, Jan, what is this about? And we go, actually, no, that's not very solidary, not a good practice. So in the end, we took that point out. No, the dock workers and transport workers have to help each other. There has to be solidarity. So we took it out, and we are now trying to help ports help the seafarers.
How are you doing that?
On our level here, we can only work with the member states, with the diplomats. We actually, UNCTAD works directly with the mission of Indonesia in New York. And Indonesia is promoting a General Assembly resolution, which is really like the highest level in the United Nations, to declare seafarers as key workers. So if this resolution comes through, you could say, well, it is just a resolution, but member states, and this also raises awareness, and this would allow more member states, because at present, about half of member states, as far as I know, we have seen some statistics here from BIMCO, roughly half of member states still seem not to allow crew changes, another half does allow. So if we can shift that number towards more members allowing it through our diplomatic effort, and of course also in the ports themselves, when we do our training, we have a project with some actually United Nations, a so-called development account. So what I just started out saying, these good practices, ports learn from each other. And the very first reaction might have been for some ports, be careful, don't let the seafarers leave the ship. Now this bullet point is taken out, and it is rather, what can ports do to help in these circumstances? How can you help collaborate with the immigration police, collaborate with the airlines, collaborate with the crewing agents, with the port state control regimes, or maybe identify some ports where it is easier than others and coordinate. So that's the type of work that needs to be done. We at UNCTAD, we cannot do too much in this regard. We can just promote and mention the importance of this in the shipping podcast and help member states in the General Assembly resolution.
So, Jan, what is your favorite city in the world?
Well, apart from my hometown and village Horneburg, and I love living in Geneva, I have, in this context of the shipping, an interesting relationship with Rio de Janeiro. 50 years ago, when I was 5 years old, my father was a seafarer working for Hamburg Süd. And he came home from his travels to Rio de Janeiro, showing us slideshows with color photos and original soundtrack, saying that it was great to be in Rio de Janeiro because the dock workers were on strike, and he had 2 weeks to go to the bar every evening and play the double bass in the jazz band. Then that's 50 years ago. 33 years ago, I spent my honeymoon in Rio de Janeiro. Yeah, with my wife, still the same wife.
And what about the dock workers? Were they still on strike?
The dock workers, that comes the next one. 20 years ago, I was at a conference organized by the ITF, the real ITF, the Transport Workers Federation, ITF. They organized a big conference for transport workers in the Americas, in Rio de Janeiro. And there you had the cupola, so to say, the London people, Keith Marches, David Cockcroft, I think were the names at that time. And they invited me as the United Nations, as the devil's advocate. And I was the only one in the room, among 240 people in the room, who was not trade union member, to explain port reform and privatization. Imagine. Imagine. And at that time, we were working on PPPs, public-private partnerships, concession agreements. And we really thought, and I still think, that the landlord model is a better functioning model than the service port where it is government run. But you do it in a smooth process without creating unnecessary unemployment, with some social program and so on. So I explained this, and then there I could, of course, also tell the story that, 30 years earlier, my father had been in Rio de Janeiro and he was happy about the strikes, but now I think it's not good to go on strike. And then 17 years ago, my first mission when I had just joined UNCTAD was again to Rio de Janeiro, where we did a big conference for UNCTAD on digitalisation in shipping. That was interesting. And last week I was on a webinar with Rio de Janeiro about how to improve the efficiency of Brazilian exports, imports, and trade logistics. So I think this city, I've not been there that often, but every time I was there, I found it was a very memorable experience. And it's a beautiful city. Rio de Janeiro really is beautiful.
Well, I haven't been there, but hopefully I can go next year because the Vista International AGM and conference will be held in Rio. No, that will be in 2022 because we have had to move the one from Hamburg this year until next year. So, but I can just imagine that Rio is a beautiful place, and I can understand why you think it's your favorite one. Okay, thank you, Jan, for taking the time to speak to me. It was very interesting, and I got a lot of answers to my questions, I think.
No, that was fun. Thank you so much. And I think we are both shooting in the same direction. It's an amazing business. I personally feel really privileged to work in the United Nations for the most international of all businesses. Being here in Geneva and speaking over Zoom with the Shipping Podcast, it's a privilege. And it's your taxes who pay my salary, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. I hope to see you soon again. Thank you, Jan. I love the statement that you did in this interview. Technical development will never be as slow as today. I think you're right. Head over to Jan's blog and read about his visits to hairdressers around the globe. You will find it at janhoffmann.live. That is JanHoffmann.live. L-I-V-E. Jan suggests that I interview seafarers that have been stuck on board due to the pandemic. I actually did that early April, which is a long time ago now. So in episode 134, you can hear Rasmus Blomqvist on board the Mont Ventoux in France. And in episode 135, Sarah Brennan talks about how the US Coast Guard in New York has been affected. And on the same topic, you need to listen to Katie Ware. She is the Director of Maritime and Safety Standards at the Maritime Coast Guard Agency in the UK, and also a permanent representative of the UK to the IMO. She gave an insight in how much the COVID-19 pandemic has affected their work. I think don't miss out on that one. Jan highlighted some trends that are influencing the maritime industry right now, and that is digitalisation and decarbonisation. I believe that I will have to pursue some people who can speak about that on the Shipping Podcast. I need to stay on top of what's happening right now and let you know. The next episode is related to digitalisation and money. You don't want to miss that one either. But until the next time, you stay safe, and from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a Shipping Podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.